This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. This is about something quieter and more dangerous. It's about what happens when a system designed to distribute power evenly starts deciding who deserves it and who does not. For a long time, the machinery of government worked on an assumption you were never asked to vote on. That money appropriated by law moved according to rules, not loyalty. That disagreement was tolerated. That punishment had limits. That assumption is gone. What replaced it did not arrive with sirens. It arrived with paperwork, with pauses, with delays that looked temporary, with explanations that sounded procedural. And if you're still watching because this feels familiar, that's the point. Familiarity is how structural danger survives. Stay with me. Because the most important part of this story is not who pushed the button, it's what the button now does. And once you see that, you can't unsee where this is headed. What actually controls this system is not elections. It's not speeches. It's not ideology. It's the flow of money after the cameras turn off. Appropriations are supposed to be boring. They are meant to be mechanical, a transfer of intent from Congress into reality. But when that flow becomes discretionary, something shifts. Quietly, power no longer lives only in laws. It lives in delays, in selective enforcement, in the choice to act here and not there. That's the pivot. Because once execution becomes conditional, the system stops being neutral. It starts listening, not to statutes, but to signals. Support is rewarded. Resistance becomes expensive, not illegal, just harder. And this is where personalities stop mattering, because any system that learns this trick will reuse it. What you are watching is not chaos. It's a new logic being tested inside an old structure. And the test isn't whether it works once. It's whether anyone can stop it from becoming normal. The most dangerous changes don't announce themselves. They don't arrive as reversals. They arrive as adjustments. There was a time when withholding resources required an argument, a vote, a visible fight. Now it can look like a scheduling issue, a review, a pause that stretches just long enough to matter. Before, the system asked one question, is this authorized? Now it quietly asks another, is this worth the trouble? That's the silent shift. Because when delay becomes a tool, denial doesn't have to be declared. It can be implied, felt, absorbed. Nothing technically breaks. No single rule is overturned. But the effect is cumulative. Institutions learn. States learn. Organizations learn. They learn which requests move quickly and which ones stall. They learn when speaking costs time and when silence is cheaper. This is how pressure replaces force. This is how compliance becomes voluntary. And here's the part that matters going forward. Once a system internalizes that logic, it doesn't need constant orders. It begins to police itself. Then the abstraction snaps into focus. Large sums of money, already approved, already promised, suddenly frozen, not everywhere, not randomly, targeted. Projects that existed on paper in the morning were uncertain by nightfall. Timelines blurred. Contracts hesitated. Entire plans held in limbo without explanation that matched the scale of the damage. Officially, nothing dramatic happened. No announcement, no declaration of punishment, just the absence of movement where movement was guaranteed. And when the justification arrived, it didn't sound political. It sounded administrative, procedural, temporary. That's why it worked at first, because the shock wasn't the cut itself. It was the realization that legality was no longer the gatekeeper. Alignment was, this wasn't a budget debate. It was a message delivered through inaction. And the message was simple. The system now remembers who you are. What happens next is not about whether this was allowed. It's about what breaks when this becomes repeatable. Here's how it actually works. The damage doesn't come from a single order. It comes from discretion layered on top of obligation. Money is appropriated by law, but it is released by people people who decide timing, prioritization, urgency. That gap is the mechanism because when release becomes conditional, accountability diffuses. No one signs a document saying no. They just don't say yes. The beneficiaries are invisible. They experience speed, certainty, predictability. The cost is absorbed elsewhere by projects that stall, by services that shrink quietly, by communities that feel pressure without seeing a source. And the brilliance, if you want to call it that, is deniability. Every delay has a reason. Every freeze has a justification. Every complaint hits a maze. This isn't punishment in the traditional sense. It's friction applied selectively. And friction doesn't look like force. It looks like inefficiency, like bad luck, like the system just not working today. Which raises the next question. If this mechanism can be reused without leaving fingerprints, how often has it already been? Then it spreads, not outward, downward. From infrastructure to institutions to people who were never supposed to be leverage. Funds disappear mid-cycle. Grants revoked after criticism. Support pulled not because of failure, but because of friction. The pattern tightens. Speak up. The process slows. Push back. The review gets longer. Refuse to comply. The money waits. You don't need an announcement. Everyone sees it. States adjust. Organizations recalibrate. Professionals learn where the invisible lines are. This is how retaliation becomes efficient. No spectacle. No outrage spike. Just consequence. And when the courts step in, something else happens. The behavior doesn't stop. It shifts. Shorter windows, smaller targets, more justifications. Each block teaches the system how to try again, which means the question is no longer whether this tactic survives. It's whether the resistance can keep up. This is where it reaches you, not as a headline, as a delay, as a notice that something is under review, as a service that used to be there and suddenly isn't. You don't see the mechanism, you feel the lag. Childcare, that becomes harder to find. A bill that rises without explanation. A program that quietly stops returning calls. And because it doesn't arrive all at once, you adapt. You rearrange. You absorb. You blame yourself. That's the genius of it. Pain without attribution. Pressure without fingerprints. And if you're told this is temporary, procedural, under control, that's not reassurance. That's conditioning. Because the system doesn't need your agreement. It just needs your patience. If this feels personal now, it should. Because once governance starts sorting people by compliance, everyone eventually gets sorted. Stay with me. Because what looks like isolated inconvenience is about to become something much harder to reverse. By the time this logic is visible from the outside, it's already mature. Other governments notice first. Not the speeches, the process. They see money slow, where alignment weakens. They see rules applied unevenly, then defended as technical. They recognize the pattern because they've seen versions of it before. Capital responds. Research hesitates. Partnerships grow cautious. Because systems built on predictability collapse when execution becomes political. This isn't local anymore. It's structural. Supply chains don't like uncertainty. Science doesn't survive intimidation. Elections don't function under fiscal threat. And once trust erodes at the center, the ripple moves outward. States hedge. Institutions diversify. Allies adjust expectations downward. The danger here isn't collapse. It's substitution. When neutral systems stop being reliable, new ones form around power instead of law. And those systems don't announce themselves, they just work differently. Which leaves us here, watching a domestic experiment quietly become a global signal. And the signal is still unresolved. From here, there are 3 ways this accelerates. The first is adjustment. The system absorbs the stress. Courts block. Congress pushes back. Delays become routine. but survivable. Governance slows. Nothing breaks. But nothing feels stable again. The second is erosion, not dramatic. Incremental, each workaround becomes precedent. Each blocked action teaches a narrower, quieter version next time. The rules stay on the books. Their enforcement thins. Institutions grow cautious. They pre-comply. They stop testing limits. Not because they agree, because friction is expensive. And then there is rupture. That's when containment fails. When courts are ignored or overwhelmed, when appropriations become suggestions, when loyalty fully replaces law as the organizing principle, rupture doesn't arrive as a moment. It arrives as a realization the day you notice that no one expects neutrality anymore. The danger is not that one of these paths exists. It's that the system can slide between them without announcing the shift, which means the future isn't decided by intention. It's decided by tolerance. There's a temptation at this point to look for relief, for a ruling, a vote, a moment where the system proves it still works and the story ends. That moment isn't coming because this was never about a single action. It was about a method, a way of governing that tests how much pressure institutions can absorb before they adapt, not break. Adapt, and adaptation is the danger. When delays feel normal, when retaliation feels procedural, when neutrality becomes optional instead of assumed, nothing collapses. Something worse happens. The rules remain, but only some people can rely on them. If you're looking for reassurance, this isn't it. What matters now is attention, memory, pattern recognition, because systems don't fail when they're attacked. They fail when the attack becomes familiar. This story doesn't end here. It keeps moving quietly through budgets, grants, permissions, and pauses. And the next chapter won't announce itself. If you want to understand where this goes next, you'll have to keep watching how power moves when no one is supposed to be watching. That's where the real signal is.